Welcome to another episode of the Steeple Report. On this episode, we are privileged to have the executive director of the Judeo-Christian Outreach Center, located in Virginia Beach, Mr. Todd Walker. Welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me, Richard.
Well, I'm really excited to have you. As I told you when we spoke on the phone, this is a new YouTube channel, and my motivation is to have interesting guests that can inform the viewers of what's going on, in the broader Christian community. I know you're not technically a Christian organization, but I think what the work you're doing is certainly God's work, and you're lifting up and saving souls. So I don't know how much closer to God's work you can get.
Yeah, and I would say we are a Christian organization, but with caveats in regard to monies that we get and that type of stuff. But I think that anytime you're doing this type of work, you're definitely doing God's work, and I'm always looking to elevate the least of our brothers and sisters out here in the community. So,
Right.
I always tell our clients, anytime they try to give us the praise, I'm like, don't give it to us, give it to him.
Mm-hmm.
We're just vessels for him, and he's working through us. So
Amen.
Definitely.
Amen. To get us started, why don't we learn a little about you, and then we'll get into the organization and what the organization's doing, and why don't you just tell us a little about yourself, your background, that kind of stuff.
Okay, well, I'm originally from Springfield, Ohio, born and raised there. I remember probably in the elementary school, I had my mom, one of the things she told me was everybody's given spiritual gifts, and so that can bless others.
Yes.
And also bless yourself. And as I grew older, I figured out one of my gifts was sports.
Wow.
And I was a pretty good athlete, pretty good football and basketball player growing up in Springfield, and eventually became one of the top athletes in the state playing football and basketball. And unfortunately for me, when she said gifts, she said plural. But for me, it became gifts singular. And that became my goal, to be a professional football or basketball player, whichever one happened for me. And, I ended up getting scholarships for both sports. I was blessed in that regard. I decided to go to Indiana University and play football there, and had a wonderful career. And a lot of people always say, how did you make that decision? Well, I just figured I had a better opportunity to make it to the NFL versus the NBA, just because of the positions I played and that type of stuff. But
now, we haven't met in person. How big of a guy are you, and what position did you play?
I'm bigger now. So when people see me,
aren't we all, brother?
So when people see me now, they always ask, they say, well, did you play on the line? I said, well, I did, but I played tight end.
Okay.
So I was a heck of an athlete. So back then I was probably about 6'4", and at my peak I was about 260, 265, and ran a 4.6.
Wow.
So I was extremely fast.
That's a good time for a big guy.
Oh yeah, I could move. That was one of my attributes, and one of the things that attracted the NFL to me was, being fast, and then also being a great blocker. I had pretty good hands. I'm not going to say I was Randy Moss, but I felt I could move the chains when necessary. So when you look at my average, I had about a 10-yard catch average. So hey, that's good enough for a first down every catch. So
and that's actually quite on the top end of tight ends.
Oh yeah.
I mean, wide receivers that are, doing go routes, they're getting 15 and 20, but tight ends, 10 and 11 is
especially back in the late 80s, early 90s, that was the running back era, and I was fortunate enough to play with 2 first-team All-Americans while I played at Indiana. I played with Anthony Thompson, who was runner-up for the Heisman in '89, and played with Von Dunbar my senior year. We came out together, and I think he finished 5th in the Heisman, but he led the nation in rushing.
Wow.
And he was a first-round pick for New Orleans Saints.
Right.
So
right.
It was a great time. Sports did a lot for me, I think, because it all of the things I learned, the mentors I had along the way. You know, my high school football coach, I only had him 1 year, but he changed my life around because, you know, I wasn't even going to play football my senior year, and our coach resigned. He wouldn't let me play defense. And then our new coach came in and said, man, he promised me, he said, listen, I'm going to let you play defense, but, you know, I truly believe you can be a Division I football player on a high level. And at that time, Richard, believe it or not, I didn't have any recruiting letters. Nothing. So I went into my senior year with nothing. I had some offers for basketball, but none for football. But anyway, he instilled so many great things in me. And one story I want to share that really drives me now is, I remember we were playing the game and it was a tight game, and I had made 3 tackles in a row. So each time I'm making a tackle, he was yelling to me from the sidelines, and I wouldn't look. A tough game. I'm irritated. You know, I don't think my teammates are living up to what they need to be doing. I feel like I'm doing everything, and he's yelling my name the whole time. And so they called a timeout. It's 4th down. They're trying to decide if they're going to go for it or not. And I finally look over there, and I'm like, what? His name was Coach Taylor. And he said, I need more. And I just wanted to throw my helmet to the ground, because I'm thinking, I know he just heard my name on the intercom making the last 3 tackles, and he's telling me I need more. And so the next play, they went for it on 4th down. I dropped in pass coverage for the defense we call. I got an interception, take it down the sidelines. I put us in position to win. So I get knocked out of bounds. Teammates jumping all over me. As they lift me off the ground, he's standing there. And he said, no matter if you're on the football field, the basketball court, or in the game of life, don't ever think that you've given enough.
It's a good lesson.
I was 17 when he told me that. And that's what drives me every day. I always go into something figuring I didn't do enough. You know, I got to do more. Right. And always constantly challenge myself and work to invest in myself to figure out ways to do more. Now, later on in the week, he explained to me, yes, you out there doing your job, but you didn't do anything to uplift your teammates.
Right.
You know, right. And that's part of your role as being a leader on the team, being one of the best players on the team. So, right. You know, having those type of challenges has really fueled me in life. And like I said, going on and great career in Indiana, we played in 4 bowl games, and, you know, went to the NFL Combine and had the opportunity to do that. Played in the Peach Bowl twice, Liberty Bowl, Copper Bowl, played some big games, Auburn, Tennessee, wow. Baylor, South Carolina. So just awesome moments, man, just all over the place. But I remember, man, I finally got an opportunity. I didn't get drafted, but I signed with the Denver Broncos. Okay. And I remember going to Denver, and go back to what my mom said. I'm thinking, man, this is what God put me here for, is to make it in the NFL, and I can bless people by being in the role that I'm in, being an NFL player. And bam, an injury happened. And, you know, my football dream was gone. And I remember praying, and this was probably my life-changing moment for me. Was I remember going to an agent I didn't sign with coming out of college, and asking him to take me on, because so many people were disappointed I didn't make the team. Really more so than me in some cases. You know, I was like, what's going on? And I remember getting on my knees and praying. After I went to him, I said, can you take me on as a client? He said, you need to quit your job and give 50% of your time to football, and then I may take you on as a client. And so I went home and prayed on my knees at night, and the Lord said, Todd, everybody that's helped you get to where you are, all the hands that have been on you to achieve the success that you've achieved in football and academically. I got my degree in criminal justice when I was at Indiana. I need you to go back and do that for somebody else. That's what lit the fire in me, Richard, to do what I'm doing today, because I knew at that moment I was meant to be a professional, just not a football player. Right. You know, a professional in the human services field. And that's what lit my fire, because then I had an opportunity to reflect back on all the amazing people that had been in my life that had invested in me. And I remember growing up just wondering, why are these people trying to help me be, but you know, because they can see the talent. People saw things in me that I couldn't see. How did Coach Taylor see in me that you can play in the Big Ten and I didn't have any recruiting letters or anything? How did he see that? Right. But we have to do that now when we're in our role, working with homeless individuals or working with individuals, that we're helping with food and dealing with food insecurity and providing them with, food resources to help them overcome that,
Right.
to help lift them up,
Right.
and we tell them all the time, there's a reason your windshield's bigger than your rearview mirror.
Yes.
There's a reason why, whatever you went through, you're still here. So
Yeah.
really, you've won. Even though you feel you've been defeated, you've won because you didn't take you out.
Right.
You have an opportunity to move forward and make your test become your testimony.
Right.
And that's been my challenge every day, is to just lift people up, to let them know that you can overcome whatever you're dealing with right now, especially if it's hunger or homelessness, which is what we specialize in.
Not to rob you of any of your time, but let me tell you a little story that just flashed to my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I live in an area, you know, we're in Virginia Beach, so we're gonna talk inside baseball for other people that don't know Virginia Beach.
Mm-hmm.
I live right by Neptune Park, so
Mm-hmm.
we have a fair amount of homeless that are here, and I have a dog that I walk frequently, so I go out of my way to always, extend a hello or what have you. I also give out breakfast sandwiches every Sunday. I walk the boardwalk and try to, help out anybody who might be hungry. So a lot of the regular homeless people know me.
Mm-hmm.
And one day, one of them came running over to me and he said, "I want you to talk to somebody." I said, "What about?" He goes, "Well, there's this young lady. I've been kind of watching after her, but I want you to talk to her and tell her that this is the worst place for her. She won't listen to anybody here, but I think she might listen to you." I said, "Wow, okay, I'll give that a try." And something flashed in my mind when I started talking to her, and I said, "Are you a Christian?" And she said, "I was brought up in the church." I said, "So you're familiar with the cross?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Why don't you think about the cross in this way? That, there's 4 points on the cross. So the one pointing up is your obligation to God. The one pointing down is Him watching over you. The one to your right is how do you influence others, and the one to your left is how do others influence you."
I love that.
And she goes, "I never thought about that." I said, "You have a lot of people in your life. You have God. You always have God, and He's always watching you. Are you living a life that is making Him proud of you?"
Mm-hmm.
And the same can be said for the people on your left and right. Are you influencing people, or are you allowing the right people to influence you and making good decisions? And I went back later in that day, and that gentleman who introduced me to her ran back over to me. I said, how's she doing?" He goes, "Right after you talked to her, she called her mom, made up with her parents. They picked her up and brought her home."
Wow.
And, that impacted me, that it doesn't take much, but a little encouragement for a lot of people to, realize that, maybe they're off track, and, maybe that
Mm-hmm.
argument they had with their parents is pretty small change.
Right.
And he said, "Wow, what you said to her really was very effective." I said, "I hope it helped her." He goes, "Well, it helped me too." He said, "I want to get off the streets too." So you don't know. My point is, you know, just by extending some leadership and extending some care and love, what impact you could have.
Yes. It's almost like in the Bible where it talks about the farmer that plants a small crop will reap, plants a small amount of seeds to reap a small crop. You plant a large amount of seeds, then
Yeah,
you reap a harvest. And
right.
so, I always tell our staff, especially when we're dealing with a difficult client, I said, don't forget, our job is to plant the seed. So regardless of how difficult those individuals may be, we got to continue to plant and try to cultivate those seeds as long as we can. Now, in your situation, in your story, you were blessed enough to see the flower. We're not
You
always
don't
in
always,
position.
right?
Yeah, we don't always, but we have to go into that with that mindset. We love it because we're social workers. We social services. We want to be able to see the fruits of our labor and the benefits, and everything. But we can't do that because sometimes, I'll think back on stuff that people told me years and years ago. They might not realize it changed me or
Sure.
made me think about something or put me on a different path.
Yeah.
But it happens, and so our requirement is to do the same. I
Right.
wake up every morning. And when I go in, I said, I'm looking for God to use me today.
Yeah.
How are you going to use me? Use me to bless somebody.
Right. Yeah. I recently had a discussion with somebody about, the idea that, a lot of churches, and I'm not saying they're not well meaning, but a lot of people wait for the church to come up with a program that they can then sign on to. And, I think that's great. And I think those programs, could do a lot of great things in the community and impact people. But I think it's something that we can't forget, that we as individuals can have an impact acting on our own.
Most definitely.
Just reaching out one-to-one to people can be more impactful than any big program, funded or not.
Most definitely. Yeah, you have to be used daily.
Yeah.
If you wait, you're missing opportunities. So
Absolutely.
We don't want to do that because, as we've seen with COVID, this thing can be life or death. And homelessness can be life or death with or without COVID.
Yeah, I mean,
you know what I mean? So,
I see, like I said, the regular homeless people in my area. I see them over and over again, and there was one woman who I hadn't seen in a while. I knew where she was because I ran into her 6 months ago. The city of Virginia Beach and some other, I guess, players were working out so that they could be in hotels, and
yes.
I think from her perspective, it was good because, she didn't have exposure on the street, which is always a good thing. And, luckily the last update, which brought joy to my heart, was that she got approved for an apartment. So she's going to be really off the street. And,
Yes.
so, I'm thankful for that. So why don't we, talk about the Judeo-Christian Outreach Center and give us an overview of the various programs and the people that you're helping and but maybe before we do that, actually, maybe you should give us a picture of what's the big picture on hunger and homelessness, so we can understand the scale.
Well, definitely to defeat it and eliminate it. And I think what we've learned over the last few years is that we had to kind of change this, especially with hunger, I would say, and homelessness. We both have looked at collaboration. So we found that, not a whole bunch of people doing the same thing. Sometimes that could be good. It depends on what you're doing. But, just say, for example, with our dealing with our hunger, our food programs that deal with hunger, we're collaborating with people like, the food bank in Southeastern Virginia to be able to get food, because they're one organization, but may not be able to disseminate that much food in the areas where needed. And so you collaborate with somebody with us that's seeing seeing individuals that are in need in our community, in our area, and then we can be able to disseminate that food and make sure that, we can eliminate hungers in those pockets of areas.
Sure.
That they may not be able to get to, but giving us the food, working together. So that, and then with homelessness, I think the big shift, Richard, happened, especially for our organization around 2014. From 2012 to 2014, I was kind of hear about the stages of change. I was contemplating change because when I came into the organization, I think people looked at homelessness as drunks, alcoholics, mental health. Everybody wanted to fix that issue, and then they felt the individuals ready to go into housing.
Right.
But that's not the case. What we were doing was making them be homeless longer, indirectly, keeping them out on the streets, trying to fix people. And we shouldn't be in the business of fixing people. You know what I mean? We should be in the business of addressing whatever their biggest issue is. And so we had to make that shift to become what we call housing first. which is a philosophy where we feel everybody has a fundamental right to housing. That shift changed all of our programs. It changed the way we operate.
It kind of reminds me of the idea of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
There it is. You're right on point.
Because at the bottom is survival. So if you don't have a roof over your head and food in your stomach, you're not thinking about anything above that, anything more cerebral or anything more health conscious, or you're just in the safety mode. So, by solving the housing issue and then probably by extension, the food issue, probably I would assume goes hand in hand in many ways, that then they can turn to talking about their addiction or their mental health or whatever issues they may have.
You just said it. You hit the nail on the head. That's what it is. Just like Maslow's hierarchy of need, addressing the biggest need first. See, an individual that's homeless is going to have a better chance of getting stabilized on their meds or having an opportunity to reach abstinence when dealing with drugs, if that's something they choose to do, if they have a roof over their head. Right. Because it just eliminates all those other stressors of survival. And so that's what we as a community, we came together to do, is to not do housing first one, but also we realized, especially when you talk about the single homeless individual, which is what we specialize in, as far as on the housing side, National Alliance to End Homelessness often says, a homeless person, a single homeless person generally can get out of their situation on their own or with a little help, for the most part. But you do have a subpopulation of individuals that have been homeless, extensively for a long time, that we call chronically homeless. So they've been homeless a year longer, and in more cases than not, they have a disability that many times has been unidentified. And so we made a commitment that we were going to serve those individuals first. See, for years, man, we did first come, first serve.
Right.
Well, first come, first serve doesn't ensure that you're helping the most vulnerable person on the streets. True. And so in 2014, we made a decision to give up our controls, our intake controls. So when people came into our shelter, they called us directly. We decided who came in, who didn't get in. Well, we had to give that up, or we made the decision to give that up for the greater good, because we understood that in order for us to really make a dent in this homeless situation, we got to kind of collaborate together and work together. So, the city kind of oversees they're our COC lead agency. So they kind of oversee that intake process. And then they determine, based on vulnerability, who gets the bed first. So if we're both homeless, we call in on the same day. You slept on the bench on the ocean front. I slept on a friend's couch, but I know I'm not going to have anywhere to sleep the next night. And we both call in, you'll get the bed because you were most vulnerable, you were outside.
Okay.
And so that's how we're starting to see individuals that have been homeless for a long time be able to get access to beds, like the individual you talked about earlier. So, so I wanted to mention that on a grand scheme, because I think generally people drive down the street and they'll see somebody holding a sign, or a homeless person is sitting down or sitting on the curb or whatever, and they just say they just need to go get a job, or they just need to do this, or they just need to do that, not realizing that, when you face and defeat, homelessness is trauma. And so none of us know how we're going to react to trauma that may impact our lives.
Right.
You have PTSD, there's other things that come from that. Your health is affected. And so when you have trauma, you have to deal with that accordingly. So one, you need to have empathy for that individual and what they went through. And then secondly, be able to meet them where they are. Right. I always like to say our staff has been really great at being able to see where a person can be, kind of like my coach did with me, seeing where somebody can be versus where they are. And before I talk about the program, Rich, I want to share this. Before I took the job, I had got my master's in public administration. And so this was 2011. So I spent a year looking for new work. At that time, I was working in juvenile justice. I ran a group home that actually is less than a mile from JCOC. I would
Oh,
drive past it every day for 4 years. Drive past JCO, not realizing God was setting that up for me. And I remember getting my master's, and I'm thinking I'm gonna go in this cushy job. You know, I got my master's. I'm looking for a challenge. I'm praying to God every day. Give me a bigger challenge. Give me more money. Give me all this stuff. And so a year later, JCOC calls me, and I had a relationship with one of the board members, but I didn't know he was a board member. I was going out speaking to a Rotary Club that he was a part of, and he just took a liking to me. So anytime I spoke, he would be the last one waiting on me to talk.
that's
But
wonderful.
anyway, when the position came up, he asked me to come and speak with my predecessor, who Molly at the time. And so I went and talked to her, and she said, "You're the one. I've met with 10 people, but you're the one." And I was like, "No, I'm not the one," because when I pulled up, I looked at how old the buildings were, and it was a rainy day, and it just dreary. Everything, nothing looked good. You know, the buildings old, the
Yeah.
offices old.
Nothing got you juiced about it.
No. And so she continued to call me after that, begging me to interview. I eventually took the interview, and I remember after I interviewed, trying to decide if I should move forward in this. And I remember, here I go again. I was scared to do it, but I got down on my knees and prayed. My mother always told me, whether you're going through a good situation or a bad situation, you should always pray. She told me that early on. And I got on my knees, and the Lord said, "Todd, everything that you asked me for is there. You just don't like what the package is wrapped in."
Is that someone knocking on your door or my door?
No, that's actually my ice maker.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm just hearing that knocking, and I'm like, where's it coming from?
Yeah.
All right. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine. But you said you just don't like what the package is wrapped in. And that initially made me think about homelessness. We look at what the people are wrapped in. We look at their clothing, we look at their look, we look at their affect, not realizing that this person is dealing with trauma and don't know where their next meal is coming from, or where they're going to be able to sleep at, or if they're going to be safe.
Right.
And at that moment, I knew it was meant for me to take that position. And I saw all these things that I felt needed to be fixed. You know, I thought the job was going to be too hard and all that. But guess what? You know, I recognize all those things, but I had to stick my hand up and be the one to say, you know what? Let me step forward and try to make change.
Right.
And do God's work and do it on a bigger scale. And so that's just important. So that's kind of the fabric of me wanting to come in to make changes. But in regard to the programs, we have we started in 1986. We were formed by a synagogue and a few churches, one of those churches being Galilee Episcopal.
Yep.
Just
just up the street from my where I live. Yep.
Okay. Yep. So they came together and then formed JCOC. Our founder, Dick Powell, was a member of that church. Right. He served as executive director for over 25 years. And they initially started a feeding program. So you're feeding these individuals dealing with hunger. And then Dick realized, well, everybody we're feeding is homeless. And so hence the housing programs were formed. But as far as on the meal side or the food resource side, we have a community dinner that happens every day of the year. Every day of the year, we provide a meal. Through COVID, we switched to to-go meals, but we've never missed a day, even with COVID happening, to provide meals to anybody in need. And I want to point this out. We provide more meals to people who are housed than we do homeless. And I think that's another misconception. They think most of the people we're feeding are homeless, but actually they're housed. We just don't want them to make a decision between paying rent and buying groceries.
My business partner is also an AME pastor, and he runs as a CDC, part of his CDC, a food delivery throughout the county he's in New Jersey. And so I've, through him, been hearing a lot of the stories, how it's exponentially grown through COVID. And these are not the people that they were accustomed to serving. Though there still are those people, but he's seen, what would be considered, I guess, middle class people that he never expected to pull up are waiting in line,
Yeah,
and so a
yeah,
lot of people have become vulnerable, because the economy has stopped in many
yes.
respects for and maybe they weren't well prepared financially. So yeah, everybody needs
Yeah,
help.
and same here. We've seen a lot of families coming for the meals. We also do a food pantry that we do. We were doing 3 days a week pre-COVID. Now we just ramped it up to 2 days, and
Right.
eventually we'll get to three. But we had over 100 new families sign up. About a month ago. So
Yeah.
100 brand new people to the system, and then we do a food box program for families with children under the age of 18.
I'm going to at the end of this video, when I go to edit it before I upload it,
Mhm.
I'm gonna show some statistics, as well as I'm going to give a overview of JCOC's programs
Oh,
and
great.
phone
Okay.
numbers and emails and websites. So anybody that wants to volunteer or donate or needs help, that's where they can find some information and reach out.
Definitely. Yep. Thank you for sharing that. And then we, like I said, we do an emergency shelter. We had the only year-round shelter in the city. We actually partnered with the city of Virginia Beach in 2018, and we now operate that shelter out of the Housing Resource Center
Right.
on Witch Duck Road. And so we also operate the day support program. A homeless individual needing to use the shower or computer resources, do their laundry, or housing resources to get connected, to get referred to a program to get permanent housing. We do that. We also do a program that we call Rapid Rehousing,
Okay.
where we actually, and this is one I love, and it's one of the best initiatives to help get people off of the streets, is we recruit landlords and property managers to negotiate affordable rents. And then we get funding from the state and federally to provide rental subsidies. And then we have case management staff, or what we call housing support staff, to
Okay.
work with those individuals once we get them in the housing, to keep them in the house, keep them
And
in the housing.
and so all of that happens apart from like Section 8
Yes,
and the city services. This is all privately. I mean, you're funded through some funding from public sector, um, but you're doing the case management and managing
mm-hmm.
the properties. So that's is now
Well,
I'm no
now
expert, but is that kind of revolutionary or different than what's happening elsewhere, or is that the
it,
trend?
it's the trend now. It's been happening for a while, and even like National Alliance, that's one of the things they said is one of the best ways to combat homelessness, especially for single individual or families, is to use their rapid rehousing model. And so it's one of the things I was able to bring on board to JCOC once I took over, was to apply for a grant with the Hampton Roads Community Foundation. They gave me the seed money to start a rapid rehousing program. From
Okay.
that success, I was able to go on and get state and federal grants to do the program. What I love about it, Richard, is it actually involves the community.
Sure.
Just like our community dinner, we in the churches, businesses, Rotary clubs, different groups actually come in to bring the food, so we can be able to serve it each night. And then with rapid rehousing, you're bringing in property managers and landlords throughout Hampton Roads. Doesn't have to just be Virginia Beach. In Hampton Roads, we can house you wherever, wherever the client's comfortable at, and be able to help people get off of the streets. And we've seen a lot of landlords buy into it and want to be a part of the solution. And that's what makes it work. So one thing I will say about rapid rehousing is set up to help you short term. Sometimes you have to go longer depending on the client. Everything's tailored to the specific client.
So when you say short term, what kind of time frame are we talking about?
It could be, I think, over the last couple of years, our average length of helping somebody financially has been about 6 months.
Okay.
And our average amount of case management time has been about 8 months.
Okay.
What we're helping them. So to give you an example, if somebody, now here's another thing that's kind of revolutionary in a sense, is we really utilize a lot of shared housing. And so what I mean by that is we've convinced the landlords to put leases on rooms and not just one lease for the whole house. So if a three bedroom house, each person has their own lease. So if somebody doesn't pay their rent, doesn't affect the other person,
Right.
and
Right.
keep the utilities in the owner's name. And then we just weave that into the rent payment. And it just makes sense. Sometimes you may have somebody that have utility arrearages, they're astronomical and they can't pay. And so that would be a barrier for them
Yeah.
getting in housing. And so,
Right.
even in shelter, when we have people come into any of our housing programs, we look at knocking down whatever barrier it is to get you in housing. Now, I don't know if you probably would know this, but what do you think would be the first thing that we generally do? I would say on average, probably more often than not, there's one thing we do when a homeless person comes into our program and we try to help them get housing. What would you think that is? Just, being a concerned citizen.
Gosh, I can think of a few things that I'm just thinking, like, if people are out on the street, I know probably the first thing I'd want to do is, have a shower and put on some fresh clothes and get some
Yes.
food in my belly.
Yeah. So but I'm saying in regard to getting housing, is we help you get your identification.
Yes. Okay.
ID. Most
Right.
people don't have your ID. That's a huge barrier, whether it's housing, and then you can throw in their employment.
Right.
Being able to get a job, getting an ID. So generally, we spend a lot of money paying for, and it's money that's donated from, our supporters throughout the community to send off for people's identification, birth certificates.
Right.
We have people we've sent off everywhere, man, from New York to California and everywhere in between, just depending on where the person's born. So eliminating barriers first to get that person in the housing. So that's how we tackle it versus in the old days, saying, hey, you got to stay clean and you got to do this and you got to do that. We shifted the focus more so on the housing because, we're not substance abuse counselors. We're not. We can give you some good information, but to be honest, if a person is going to get clean, they got to want to do it themselves.
Oh yeah,
then
it's never going to happen unless they're I'm
Right.
actually I have a friend in my life who has had some issues over a long period of time, and as friends we've discussed that he will never overcome addiction until he wants to overcome addiction.
Right.
So that has to be the first step.
Has to be the first step. So, those are things we do. And then, like I said, if you want to be connected to other resources, we do that. Things that we don't specialize in, but somebody else may specialize in it, like employment assistance or that type of thing. We can help you with resumes and that sort of stuff. Now, I do want to mention we do serve veterans. And I want to make sure that's very important, be in a community.
Well, especially where we are.
Military. Yes, exactly.
For those that don't know, Norfolk and Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Virginia is the largest naval base in the world, period. And, we usually have 2 or 3 aircraft carriers plus a whole lot of other things.
Mm-hmm.
Virginia Beach is home to SEAL Team 6. We have all sorts of military, to the north of us, just outside. We have a couple Air Force bases between here and DC. We have, Marine units. So we are a military town here.
Yes, we are. And I'm happy that we, in 2011, we opened our West Lane project, which is a 16-unit apartment complex. We also have a duplex that we own there as well, but we serve 16 veterans, men and women, single men, single women, and assist them in getting housing as quickly as possible. The program is a year long. It can go up to a year, but our average length of stay right now is about 5 months. I'm very proud of that.
Yeah.
When I came in, we were about 2 years. Wow. It was a 2-year program. I rewrote the grant to make it 1 year. I wanted to put the pressure on us to make sure we're doing the job we need to do to help our veterans get housed.
A sense
and I'm
of urgency.
happy to say,
yeah,
and I'm happy to say over the last 3 years, we've had one of the highest outcomes as far as our veterans going into permanent housing in the country.
Wow.
We've been over 80% the last 3 years. We were 90% last year.
Wow.
So amazing. Even though it's a small project, so the numbers can go south, if you're not doing well. And so we've been really trying to overperform and get our veterans. I always feel there's 2 words that should never go together: homeless, and veteran.
I'm with you.
And so we work extremely hard to get our veterans in housing. And I want to say one of the things that makes it work is the housing first piece of it, and then also collaborating with other providers in the community that have funding. Like we collaborate with an organization that does rapid rehousing specifically for veterans.
Oh, great.
So, for example, Richard, I wouldn't go apply for that money knowing they have it and we have the veterans, and so we kind of work together.
The partnership is sufficient.
Is extremely sufficient. And then we do our permanent supportive housing, which I love, and we'll talk later about how we're trying to do that on a larger scale.
But let me take a step back. We touched on, you know, the addiction and mental health and some of the other issues that, you know, are dealt with, you know, after the housing is addressed. But how are those things addressed, if not within your organization? So do I assume that you have partners that come beside you and beside your counselors to help address those? Because, you know, otherwise you're just going to have they're going to come in and they're going to get their, 6 or 8 months, and then they're back on the street if they don't address those other bigger challenges.
It's a great question. Yes, we do partner with other agencies. And I want to say this, in a perfect world, we hurry up and get them in housing and then we connect the resources to them. However, there's a shortage of housing right now. So that's the fight sometimes too, is just trying to find somewhere. So in the meantime, you do connect them to those resources if they're open to it. And that's the key, if they want them. So yeah, like human services, we'll connect them there to get, say, for example, SNAP benefits. One of the blessings of being in the Housing Resource Center is it was created by the city to bring in all these different nonprofits and organizations to run a variety of services and kind of work together. But it's all in one building, so it's kind of like a one-stop shop. It's not meant to end. It's not meant to address everything, but there's some important pieces in there, like human services, where somebody get their SNAP benefits or get set up for employment training or disability benefits. Right. Now, our staff have been trained to do disability applications, and they'll be expedited. They're what we call SOAR trained. Right. So if our client has a person that may identify they got a mental illness, could be eligible for benefits, we can apply and get an answer within 6 months. So then that gives them income on a monthly basis and puts them in a better position to obtain and sustain housing. Right. So yes, we work, our veterans program, we work with the VA, who has an employment training program. So we'll make referrals there. So yeah, it's all about making sure that when a person comes in, we do what we call a housing plan. Okay. And within that housing plan, Richard, it has all the things that they feel they need to do, whether it's employment, signing up for disability, going to NA meetings, whatever the case may be. And then it's our role to make sure that we have knowledge of where we can refer those people to and stay with them and follow up with them. Sometimes take them to appointments. We utilize bus tickets, and we have vehicles that have been donated to us where we can take clients to appointments. I had 2 of my staff today. We moved a client into his place today, and we had somebody donate some furniture that we went pick that up and then put it in the place for them. So, and then our food resources, whenever we move someone in housing, we're able to provide them with food to sustain them, at least to get them going, and get them set up there. So we can, it's all about resources and connecting and wrapping those services around them.
So with the rapid housing, so what kind of metric do you use for evaluating your success? Because your hurdle is 6 or 8 months. Obviously there's a life beyond that. You're integrating services, trying to do a holistic approach. How do you do long-term metrics, or do you?
We've just started to do it. We're looking at when our services end, we want them to remain in housing or not touch the system for at least another 12 months. Right. And we consider that a success. So once our services stop, if you don't have to test the system for at least another 12 months, we consider that success.
You've done something right, that they're not
to
just
keep them there.
They're not just doing a U-turn, right?
That's right. And we've been around 65%, 65% last year.
Okay.
And pretty good, especially with the clientele we're serving, because once again, we're dealing with the most vulnerable. We're not dealing with couch surfers.
Right.
We're dealing with people with multiple issues that we need to work with them to address. So.
Yeah, and I've, just from my limited exposure to the homeless that I referred to earlier, I've seen that, okay, they're vulnerable in one way. I'll use one example. He's a smaller guy. He's probably in his 30s. He's probably only about 5'6", and $150. I mean, he's a little guy, but he's got a big mouth when he drinks. And so on a regular basis, I'd see him and I'd say, I almost said his name. I don't want to do that. I'd say, I'll make up a name. John, why do you have a black eye? Oh, well, I got into a fight. I said, John, you're 150 pounds and you shouldn't be getting in fights. He's like, my temper gets short when I drink. I'm like, do I need to say it? He goes, no, I don't need to be drinking. I said, exactly. And, luckily I've seen him recently and he's not drinking, which is amazing. But he's doing it on his own, which worries me. He kind of seems to walk away from getting support. So that tends to make him more vulnerable again. But my point was, so his issue is drinking, and then what extends out of that is violence. To your point, it's a double trauma. It's a triple trauma because he's also homeless. Exactly. And all the other things that are happening that I'm not aware of.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things we do is we've been trained, and part of Housing First is we address the behavior, but not the usage, in regard to if somebody comes into our program or our dining hall programs, we won't stop them from getting the resource or the service if they're intoxicated or high.
Right.
We won't. Now, if they're intoxicated or high and they're causing a ruckus or a disturbance, then we have to address the behavior. Yeah. You see what I mean?
Yep.
So because what was happening in the past is people that, like John, that were drinking would eliminate themselves from shelter when they came in just because they were drinking. So I didn't mention, but when we went to serving the most vulnerable, we made our rules with what we call a low barrier shelter. So we lowered all of our barriers. Really, a sex offender would be the only thing that would exclude you from coming into our shelter.
Right.
So everything else, we would pretty much accept. So we've had people come in drunk, or causing a ruckus. We try to work with them, but if it gets to the point where we can't control it and it may disrupt, somebody else's stay or service, then we may have to ask that person to leave, and they may not be ready to, accept the services we can give them at that time. So it's hard. I always say our challenge is to keep people in services long enough to be able to access housing and other resources that they can have. And I remember when I came on, Richard, one of the challenges I had was our board at the time, they were very steadfast on no drugs, no alcohol, but the way I explained it to them is if you had a mutual fund, right? You put $100 in that mutual fund and you end up losing $25, are you going to pull the 75 out knowing that's going to get taxed and you're going to lose even more? You know what I mean?
Right.
Or because you've made the investment, do you leave it in and try to get your money back and then some?
Right.
That's the money. We're talking about people.
Right.
So if we invest in somebody to help them for 3 months and they have one hiccup, why are we putting them out?
Right.
You know what I mean? I wouldn't be able to make it in my own shelter. You have one blow up or anything goes wrong, and so we were trying to ask, I think in a lot of cases, we try to ask homeless people to be perfect, and nobody's perfect.
And so whether they're homeless or not, we all know that, people that suffer from addiction, that for quite a long time, before they're successful long-term, there's always a lot of fallbacks.
No
and
doubt. No
very
doubt about
few
it.
right out of the gate, kick the habit and then, have a productive life right away. There's a lot of stops and starts along the way,
Mhm.
and yeah, so setting the bar that high, you're simply gonna have a high failure rate.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's why, we have seen homeless, up leading up to the pandemic, we did see homelessness decreased over the last like 4 or 5 years in Virginia Beach specifically. I think because, we had that, approach where we were surrounding the services, we were housing first, we lowered the barriers in all of our programs to ensure that the most vulnerable are getting the services they need. So, but it's going to take time. We haven't eliminated it. We're trying to work ourselves out of a job. And we know it's
Well,
always going to be somebody out there. So the, the,
yeah.
the key is just to make sure that, we're doing all we can to lift them up.
Well, I think I mentioned this to you before we started taping that very soon I'm going to be interviewing somebody from Samaritan House, which is another organization here. And I'm going
Mhm.
to couple these two videos kind of back to back. And I came with the title that, we are God's children too, because not only you guys cross pollinate when it comes to kind of the housing and hunger, they add on kind of the domestic violence
Mhm.
and human trafficking element. And yeah, I mean, in all those instances, wouldn't it be wonderful if all those things could be eliminated? Maybe that's a bit of utopian thinking, but uh, it has to be the goal. It
It
has to
has
be.
to be the goal. Yeah, and I think we push ourselves and challenge ourselves.
Yeah.
Samaritan House, we work extremely closely with them and other, nonprofits, and we all are in this together.
Right.
We really, all of us made those changes that I've mentioned as far as, becoming, a COC where, we have regional crisis hotline and our referrals are coming through that lane, that one door. I just think as we've seen it work together and making sure that, when a family introduces themselves to us and they're homeless or challenged, and it could be in our dining hall program, which is one of the amazing things about it is, you have people coming in that may be new to the area. And one of the great things about our dinner is I always say it's not just a meal. We're engaging those individuals and providing them with resources where they can get the help, especially because we have so many programs to be able to help people.
Right.
One of our best success stories comes out of the dining hall. We had an individual, and I'll use it. Well, I won't use his name, but I'll say John like you did, but matter of fact, I can say his name because we actually have a video for him. So his name is Rabbit. His nickname is Rabbit. He would come to the dinner for years, and he was homeless over 20 years, and he ended up having a stroke outside,
Oh my God.
living in the woods. And so when he got out of the hospital, he realized that his being able to survive, his survival rate living in the woods was going to be slim to none, dealing with, trying to get himself back together from a stroke. And so he would come to dinner. And so one day he came to dinner and told one of our staff that he didn't want to die outside and that he wanted help. And at that moment, we end up having a vacancy in our permanent supportive housing program, which is designed for people that have been homeless long term and have a disability. So you got to meet both of those criteria. And he did. And we literally were, once we got paperwork done, all that stuff, we literally took him from being outside in the woods on a Thursday to sleeping in his own unit on a Friday.
I can't even imagine, but I'm sure that there are idiosyncrasies that come with living on the street for 20 or 30 years or living in the woods for 20, and then being thrust into an apartment,
It
I mean,
is.
uh,
I'm
because
glad you pointed that out. People don't see that. Yeah.
it sounds like, oh, I live in the woods or I live on the street. It'll be better to be in an apartment. But if you've been doing something for 20, 30 years, that's a strange environment that
It is.
a lot of adaptation must have to take place.
Most definitely. I'm glad you brought that up because I don't think a lot of people understand that. They think really the work begins when they go into a place. That's when the true work begins. Now, him, for example, funny part of the story is he lost his keys twice the first week he was there because he wasn't used to having keys, and so we end up
It
getting him a
happens
little
to all of
painter.
us, but yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
And so I remember one time coming into his unit and he had a makeshift tent using 2 chairs, blanket over the chairs, had a little blanket on the little pallet on the floor. He was sleeping on the floor. So he wasn't even sleeping in the bed. He had a roof over his head, but he was so
Well,
used that
yeah.
adaptation. So we had to be patient with him,
Sure.
constantly engaging him about,
Yeah.
sleeping in his bed and how to be more comfortable and
Right.
enforce it. And we didn't want to make him feel odd by
No,
doing what he was doing because that was normal for him.
but if you're used to sleeping on the ground or on a hard surface, a bed may not even be desirable for some.
Exactly.
It might be so alien because it's so soft, and it's just not what they're accustomed to.
Right. And he did well. I mean, I'm so happy for him. He's done extremely well. He's been in our program about 4 years and has just been awesome. Seeing his health improve. He does art. He just does a lot of therapeutic stuff to kind of keep himself engaged. And
Wow.
he's great. And we've seen that, man, just time and time again. When you put the roof over their head, see him change. I had
How old is he?
He's in his 60s.
Oh, wow.
He's in his 60s. And we had another guy, younger guy in his 40s that we just put in. When I tell you, I mean, he will cuss you out. He got put out of shelter many years. And he and I, for whatever reason, let's tell you how God works, we had a wonderful rapport. Now, he would always talk to me. And I remember he had a housing option. They called him for housing. We were so excited. And he was causing a ruckus in shelter. And so I had the case manager bring him to me. Said, bring him to my office because, it's last resort before we would have to do something we didn't want to do. And so we met. He said, Todd, I'm going to get it right. I'm going to fix it. He eventually left and went AWOL. He went out on a drinking binge and he didn't come back. We didn't see him for 3 weeks. Wow. This tells you how wonderful God is. When he finally shows back up, we get him back in the shelter. We begin to working with him again. We had a vacancy in our permanent supportive housing program, and his name was the one that came up. And I remember everybody just kind of being leery, like, will he make it down there, or will he cause a ruckus there?
Right.
And I just remember, like, hey, we need to give him a chance and work with him. And when we put him in there, man, Richard, I'm telling you, we got him in that apartment, and he has been modeled. I'm talking about no issues, no complaints, helpful. Yeah. We're trying to work on him getting his disability right now. He's been a great person over there. I've just seen him change. His health has improved. We're helping him get to his doctor's appointments and stuff that he needs and get stabilized on his meds. Well, those are the things that housing does for you.
It's interesting because, to use my John example, I remember him saying to me that he would rather be on the street than being in a shelter because he said, on the street, I can go find somewhere to be alone. When I'm in a shelter, it's such chaos because there's all these people crammed into a place. He said, either I want to be on the street or I want to be in an apartment by myself where I'm not exposed to, all the chaos that can go on in a group situation.
Yeah, and some feel that way. We have some people that have refused to come in the shelter for years. Now, we've had some that have made the decision to come in. And then it's not like they thought it would be. And then we were able to house them quicker so they didn't have to be there as long anyway. Our average length of stay in shelter is about 60 days.
Okay.
A median length of stay. So we do pretty good moving you on successfully, but we take as much time as we need based off of whatever your situation is. Right. And so that's the challenge sometimes is they don't want to come in, but we try to tailor everything to the person. So say, for example, somebody does need time out and they need to go outside and get some air. We'll let them do it because we know the chances of them coming back inside being successful is going to be greater than not. Right. The challenge for us is making sure they're not going outside to get something.
Right.
Will it be an alcoholic beverage or something? So you got to kind of gauge that. So you see how it's challenging because you got to make sure that the person doesn't have wrong intentions.
Right.
But if somebody but we've done that in the past plenty of times that we had two residents arguing or something. One of you need to go out and get some air, and then you can come back.
Right.
And then we go from there. So we do try to make those type of
Yeah.
accommodations because we understand, you put all these different people
High tension.
in one area, man. It's really the hardest part of the job, but
Yeah.
it's also the most rewarding because you see so many miracles happen. I like to say I got a front row seat to see miracles happen every day. So we see those individuals going like the previous person I mentioned, and then now he's in housing. And he's like abundantly succeeding. I mean, just, really doing extremely well and getting back to being the person that he was. You know what I mean?
To use a golf metaphor, those are the shots that bring you back the next time.
That's right.
When you have successes, those are the ones that, kind of help you overcome some of the, maybe your failures or your, to use that golf metaphor, your missed shots. If you have that one good one, okay, that's why I came out here. In your case, that success kind of, takes a little of the pain away from some of the ones that maybe weren't as successful.
You're exactly right. And I call it fuel for the soul.
Right.
So when we help somebody be successful, it gives us that fuel. And that's what drives me every day because,
right.
Anytime you're like, well, is this person going to make it or not? It's like, no, I think about the ones that did make it that we didn't think would make it.
Right.
And that just drives us daily.
And you got to pray for them the whole way through.
The whole way through. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. One of the things I often get asked is, how come you help people? And I say, well, somebody helped me. And so we cultivate a spirit of giving back. Those individuals want to give back when they do extremely well.
Right.
They want to come back and share their story because they've been in those individuals' situations before.
And I'm sure you've heard it. You've experienced it because you already told us the story. I certainly have. I think everybody that's, reached some quality of life can always point to, at least a handful, if not more, people that helped them get there, people that mentored them, people that just were there, that were role models, something, and when you think about the people that, we're talking about that are homeless and hungry, I tend to think that a lot of times it's got to be that they didn't have those people in their lives that we were fortunate enough to have. Maybe
You're exactly right.
Maybe they came from a dysfunctional family of their own and didn't really have any good role models and good influences in their life that even opened up those doors to even know they exist. They don't even know the door's there oftentimes. And so, what you're doing maybe for the first time as grown men, maybe they're only seeing that door for the first time and having a strong role model and mentor for them for the first time. So, what
exactly
you're doing,
right.
Can change a life, and it doesn't matter where they are in their span of their life. If you can lift them up and help them to live the rest of their life in a better way, you're doing the right thing, and you're respecting God's desire for everybody to reach, their pinnacle. So
continuing to plant those seeds and watch for the growth. Yep. And see that growth happen.
So what's next? Anything new that you want to?
Yeah, well, one of the things we're about to embark on is a capital campaign in the future to build. One of the things that happened when we moved our shelter, it opened the door because we ran our shelter on campus for years at our main campus at the ocean front. So when we moved that down to Wichita, it was like, okay, what's next? We have an abandoned building on the property that was extremely old and dilapidated and about 4,200 square feet. And so when I initially came to JCOC, it was like, we need to tear that building down and build something there. And I just remember saying, well, why would we have a new building surrounded by a bunch of old ones? Maybe we need to look deeper into that. And I think by 2015, we made a decision that we wanted to rebuild our whole campus. our dining halls, be able to operate
Right.
more efficiently. I put too much money right now into maintenance, and that money could be going towards the programs.
Right.
I
Yeah,
remember
at
last
some
year
point, you're putting band-aids on old things that are crumbling.
that are continuing to crumble. You're exactly right. So, we made a decision to create an affordable housing project. And so that's the biggest issue right now is there's just not enough affordable housing. And I remember saying, well, why not us? And so we went on a 5-year odyssey. We had some challenges and some obstacles, and I won't get into those, but stuff we had to overcome over the years. And eventually we went to the Planning Council in December of 2019 and was unanimously approved. And then in June of 2020, despite the pandemic, we went before City Council. Let's tell you how God works. Still went before City Council and got unanimously approved to build our project.
Wow.
So we're in the process now of, putting those pieces together to be able to get to the point where we can raise the capital about 7 to 10 million to build 38 single room occupancies, be a little just short, maybe about 300 square feet per unit. Also, for individuals coming out of homelessness, veterans coming out of homelessness, we kind of want to have a mixed use site.
Right.
So 38 units, and then also a new admin office for our rapid housing team, our development team, admin, and then new dining hall. So to build it back and up off of the street. So it kind of will match a lot of the new things being built and upgraded
So
on 17th Street.
it won't stand out as this is where the poor and homeless people live.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Especially with the, new sports center. And we just want to upgrade everything, man, just to make it look nice and have something that people can be proud about when they be able to come home and share. And so this, I'm telling you, this is actually, I truly feel in my heart it's going to be transformational for not only us as an organization, but the community. We do it on a small scale now, and we see the victories and how people are doing so well once we get them housed. And these are like they call chronically homeless the hardest to serve, have the most issues. And so we're looking to house those individuals. And, you take 38, we have 51 beds in shelter. 38, we have enough to fill it right now. And so that's our new vision and a new challenge and something that we're excited about.
That is exciting.
Moving forward, now that we got the approvals, we can really focus on putting our plan together. So that's the stage we're in now is just, the planning phase and getting all things together before we launch the campaign. So we're just extremely excited about that and being able to see more people get off the streets and still continue with our food component. I think a lot of people thought we were going to give that up, but, there's still too many people we've seen with COVID. There's just been too many people that actually need that resource. And we want to continue to be able to provide it to them.
Yeah, as we said, the food insecurity for people that were never insecure before or they were borderline has mushroomed. So, so they need those services. Well, I want to say thank you for joining us. I think it's important that everybody, not just locally, because I mean, even though you're working here in Hampton Roads, this kind of environment, these kinds of services, these kinds of challenges that you face, these can be picked up and moved anywhere geographically. It's the same things happening elsewhere, or everywhere. So, this is not just a local thing, even though, we're speaking to you about the local issues. But I wanted to thank you for giving a lot of people who maybe never had the transparency into these issues, because sometimes people just don't brush up against them. So I think it's informative that people know what's going on. And I'd like to give you a minute or two to kind of share whatever's on your heart or mind. The mic's yours.
Yeah, I would just like to say we have a regional crisis hotline. So I want to put that number out there, 227-5932, for somebody that may be homeless and need help. And then they can help, direct you on the right path to be able to get whatever resources that you need. And understand that if you see somebody holding a sign up or you see somebody that you feel needs help, it's always great to give them a resource. One of the things we started doing was putting together snack bags with healthy snacks in it, and then putting a card that has all kind of resources in it. So not only are you giving them something to help them for the day, but you're providing them with a resource that could put them into a better place tomorrow. And so, that's what I want people to kind of focus on, and never think that you can't do anything. If you have a heart to help, then you're a bonus. You're somebody that can be used if you have a heart to want to help. And so, never miss that opportunity to bless somebody, especially if it's on your heart, because you never know what they're going through. I've went through situations, Richard, where people just didn't know exactly what I was going through. But for whatever reason, God put them in the right position at the right time to say the right thing to me, to send the right email, to give me something, just the right thing to help uplift me and get me out of that space and put me in a positive light. So, we all have it happen to us from time to time. So we see somebody and we feel it in our heart to do it. Don't be scared. People really appreciate, individuals coming to help. And I will say this, ending, when we do our community dinner, I think one of the blessings of it is that the people that come in there to serve, the people that come to eat, whether they're homeless or struggling with the food insecurity, they're so grateful that those individuals are there, and they're not solicited to be there. They're there because they want to be there. And that opens the door to, that person getting the help that they need, because it starts to form that trust.
Right.
So so never miss a moment to be a blessing to somebody else.
Well, you've been a blessing to us this evening, and thank you for having such a big heart to do this work. I can't even imagine some of the things you must see and deal with that are not easy, because it's not all roses. I'm sure you see a lot of things that could be discouraging. So thank you for your dedication to this good work that can transform lives. So
thank you for having me, man. And I'm giving a whole lot of information, so I know you're gonna have slides that'll show information. So if anybody has any questions, they'll have the information to reach out if they want to know more info or how they can be a part of the solution.
Right.
And nothing works without our volunteers.
Right.
So, we definitely look for volunteers all the time to come in and help us in a variety of ways.
Well, after we've only spoken on the phone, now on Zoom, my next step is I can't wait until this COVID stuff gets a little better and we can shake hands in person.
Yeah, definitely. I look forward to it.
I do too. Well, thanks for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure to have you and to meet you.
Yep. Same here, Richard.
Okay.
Pleasure to meet you.
Take care. Have a great night.
All right. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.